Today on Franchise Legends, I'm excited to welcome Dan Atchison, Senior Director of Franchise Development for 911 Restoration. Dan brings a rare dual perspective to the franchise world. After more than a decade working alongside the 911 Restoration corporate team, he also stepped into ownership himself, giving him firsthand insight into what it truly takes to launch, grow, and scale a successful restoration business. 911 Restoration is a family-owned brand built around a powerful competitive advantage, exceptional communication, and what Dan calls good bedside manner during moments of stress for a homeowner. In an industry driven by captive demand, regardless of the economy, the brand has created a proven model focused on strong launches, deep training, relationship-based growth, and long-term franchise success. Today, we're diving into what makes the franchise restoration industry so resilient, what the ideal franchise owner looks like, and how 911 Restoration is helping owners build million-dollar businesses through diversification, leadership, and support. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today on the Legends podcast. As a Franchise Legends podcast interview, tell me about why Dan Atchison? Why would we choose Dan Atchison as a Franchise Legends podcast? And then also as Senior Director of Franchise Development, tell us about your business, yourself. We're so excited to hear.
Yeah, of course. And again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been working on 911 Restoration's corporate team on and off for almost 11 years at this point. Been selling the franchises for a long time, and I actually sold myself one of the franchises a year and a half ago. So I'm as much a franchise developer as a franchise owner, and I live that experience every day.
Wow. So you can tell real firsthand knowledge on both ends of the spectrum of the why, the how, the when, the what for.
Yes. And I'm full of little tips that I wouldn't have known had I didn't own one of the franchises.
Oh, well, that must be why you're a franchise legend already.
I hope so.
So how do you describe 911 Restoration and how it operates in moments when homeowners and businesses are under real stress?
So this is something that we really drive home in our training for new franchise candidates, because it's really where we've identified a space in this market where we can fill a big need, right? Most in restoration is kind of like it's a very unusual business because all of the companies use the exact same equipment. They all use the exact same software because the insurance companies require that. And in many cases, the only thing that separates them is the color of their truck, right? But what we found through doing our own research is that when we train our franchise owners to treat a traumatic experience like a doctor with good bedside manner, that's really what we drive home in our training. And it's what translates to much better results for my franchise owners out in the field. A lot of our competitors have the reputation of, going in there, ripping everything up, not explaining anything, and then leaving. Whereas we try to separate ourselves through quality communication. In fact, on the front of our vans, it says communication as good as our restoration, which is a big promise to live up to. And of course, we're not always perfect. I screw things up occasionally, but on the most part, that good communication is really what separates us from the others. The other thing too is in terms of working for the corporate entity and what that's like, we're still, a smaller family-owned business, right? We're not we're not publicly traded. We're not owned by private equity. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only restoration franchise where a franchise candidate will have the CEO's phone number and can talk to them whenever you want, makes a big difference. I do think that our smaller size is what allows us to be nimble in this space. I mean, even with when COVID happened, it basically within a month of the lockdown, we had already changed all of our advertising campaigns to reflect COVID cleaning, sanitization services, and it let us get an early foot in the door. Whereas with some of those larger organizations, it's like trying to parallel park a cargo ship, right? Like it's getting them to pivot takes a lot of time. Whereas our smaller network can do that quickly.
Yes.
The other big advantage too is we don't have the intention of being that 3,000, 4,000 unit kind of franchise group. Our goal is to get to 350 to 400 franchise owners across the US and Canada. And then at that point, start looking into other services that complement restoration rather than trying to just expand through adding many owners with little teeny tiny territories.
Yeah. Okay. So help me understand 911 restoration. What is the restoration element? What is the
Yeah.
service?
So if we want to get real technical, I will use my state of Oregon restoration contractor's license description, which is non-structural demolition and cleaning, right?
Oh, wow.
So we basically, we can do the tear out, we can clean and sanitize everything. I personally don't put anything back together. I bring in, general contractors to do that. That being said, I would say 65% of our network has a general contractor's license, so they do offer those reconstruction services in-house. I just choose not to do it because I've seen my own quality of work. I'm really great with a sledgehammer and a saw, but if you ask me to like fine detail something, I'm not the guy for that.
So finesse, you would say, is not your strong point?
No, but smashing things, yes.
Smashing. Yeah, I understand. Okay, great. So I'm curious about communication being a very key element of the restoration process. You touched on that just a little bit, but that balance of communication and restoration has to play a very pivotal role. And it must be a very important element of the system and the process you have in place for success.
Absolutely. And I mean, I see this firsthand on a daily basis. Like half of the phone calls we get in, it's somebody in tears on the other end of the line. They're having a bad day. Like I always joke, I hope you never have to call me again when we wrap up the project, because it's like, if I'm there, you're not having a good day, right? We also deal with some fairly, or at least in my operation, I also deal with some even more sensitive things because we do like crime scene and trauma services in addition to our normal restoration services. And that requires even more of a professional touch and, diagnosing what needs to be done, communicating effectively, making the homeowner feel confident that, they've been understood and that we're going to take care of them. And most of the time, they don't care about what I have to do, like technically wise, right?
Sure,
they just want to feel better about it. And that's really what we really strive to drive home when we're onboarding new franchise candidates, really teaching them that empathetic, professional, bedside manner approach. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So in the restoration category, then, we are seeing it continue to grow. And what makes that restoration category so resilient as a franchise model?
So the easiest way to put it is wherever there are people, they break stuff. And people breaking things is more predictable than tornadoes and hurricanes. And that's really what we build the business around,
That's an interesting statistic. I had never heard that. That's staggering, actually.
Yeah. And, man-made disasters is really the backbone of the business. Even where I operate my franchise in Eugene, Oregon, I don't know if you've ever been to Oregon. The weather is wonderful pretty much all year. It's very mild and wet in the winters, and it's bright and sunny in the summer. We almost never have any severe weather. And you would think, oh, that would be a bad place to have a restoration company because I don't have hurricanes and tornadoes and whatnot. But that's just not the case at all. Because again, you build around the man-made disaster, and the natural disasters are icing on the cake. Right.
Wow. So there's some trends then in insurance and climate events, maybe even property ownership. And I'm just curious how those shape the demand for your services. I know insurance claims are probably a big part of the franchise model, climate events, as you already mentioned, and clearly property ownership.
Yeah. And I always joke when I'm talking to candidates that climate change is kind of good for our business model as we get more unpredictable weather events that are occurring and things like that. That certainly does affect our bottom line. But the real crux of this industry and the reason that it grows so well is because it's not dependent on the economy, right? If a person has a flood in their house, it doesn't matter what the stock market is doing. That has to get done today, right? And that captive demand is what makes this such a great business to get into. When it comes to property ownership and stuff like that, most people think of single family residential when they think of the kind of work that we do. In reality, like my best customers and really my repeat customers are more like local property management companies. And that's because, it's kind of a law of averages. The single most common job that I run into is, a dishwasher that fails and floods out a kitchen. I see that all the time. And for that to happen in a single home, that's normally like a once in 10-year kind of occurrence, right? Unless they're just really unlucky. The flip side of that is I've built a relationship with a local property management company that has 1,500 units around town. They've sent me 11 jobs in the last 30 days, right? Because they just run into that stuff all the time just by nature of having so many doors that they have to look after.
Wow. So from your seat from the franchise development side, on the corporate side, what does that successful launch as a business owner, what does it look like?
Yeah. And, obviously we want to make sure that everybody hits the ground running. We we want all of our franchisees to ideally start with a business development manager on day one, someone who can go out there and start beating the pavement from day one to make those relationships with property management companies and plumbers and things like that. Obviously, 911 does a lot on the back end in terms of marketing, where we get leads that come in naturally, online. And even the first 3 months that I was open, digital advertising made up 95% of my business, right? Where I am now, a year and a half in, I'd say about 40% of my work comes from online sources. Another 25% comes from the relationships that I've built. And then national accounts makes up that last margin.
Okay. Wow. So you've seen that trend shift from digital marketing to almost more of a referral, and then what you've set up as a foundation on the national marketing or the national brand referral.
Yeah. And that's really what we coach our franchise owners to do. Obviously, digital marketing spend is important when you're in an emergency service, but at a certain point, the amount of money you're throwing at Google, it makes more sense to just have a salesperson on staff, someone that can make those handshake relationships that bring in that repeat business, right?
Sure. So I'm curious then, how does 911 Restoration, how to train owners who may not come from the restoration background? They may not have the digital marketing, expertise. What type of technology is in play to help those new owners and train them?
Yeah, so the training with us is pretty extensive. Typically, from the time you sign to open for business, our target's about 90 days. Try to get you open in 3 months. Some of that training takes place online, where we're going over the different software systems we use, how to bill through Xactimate so that you know how to charge insurance companies, things like that. But then we also have several certifications that are required in order to open for business for water, mold, fire and smoke, all of that stuff. We offer those trainings internally, so we have our own instructor on staff who can provide some of that training. But sometimes the classes I have available don't match with a person's desired open for business date, and so they may need to go to a third-party school, but I help them find that. The final piece before you open your doors, though, is a 2-week training in Panama City, Florida. Well, 1 week is virtual, 1 week is in person. We have a flood house there. So day one, our new franchise owners show up. We hand them a fire hose and they just completely saturate the home. And for the next 5 days, we save that property.
That has on intense training. And so I'm just curious, would you consider it a better opportunity as a franchise owner, the ideal 911 restoration owner? Would it be as a hands-on operator or leaders who focus on building teams?
Focusing on building teams. Absolutely. We're not that we're opposed to owner operators, but we are wanting to move away from that and focus more on, people that have experience building a larger network. Our goal is to have 300 franchise owners that are doing at least $2 million a year in restoration. The current overall average is a little over $1 million a year, just to give you kind of like a item 19 glimpse. But again, we're trying to elevate that to at least 2 million for all of our owners.
Yeah.
And what it takes to get from 0 to 1 million is different from what it takes to get from 1 million to 5 million, right? And if we're talking about the owners that are going 5, 10 million, those are team builders, right? They're not owner operators.
Well, that's a great point. So I'm curious, can you share a franchisee success story that captures what's possible in the system?
Absolutely. I mean, I think our single most successful franchise is 911 Restoration of Reno Tahoe. I
Okay.
believe there are some videos with him on our YouTube channel where you can learn a little bit about his operation. But he really took the word diversification to heart. And the strength in restoration is that it's very much a jack of all trades, master of none kind of business.
Hmm.
And there are dozens of other services that you can plug in that still fit into the umbrella of, hey, what even is restoration, right? So I think he does, of course, water, mold, and fire. He also does pack outs. He does content cleaning and storage. He does crime scene and trauma. He does air duct cleaning. He has a plumbing business. Literally anything that he can add to it, just he's done that. And that is what makes this business even more stable. It adds more revenue streams and overall creates a better experience, across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the brand supports your owners or the brand owners. When things don't go according to plan, do you kind of have a playbook to follow after that?
We do, yeah, and we also offer 24/7 support. So, like, you're always assigned a full-time franchise business coach, and there's really two different types of franchise coaches. We have the main ones for like a brand new person who joins are much more technical and profit and loss statement focused. So it's like, hey, where can we identify problems in spending?
Yeah,
Or like, oh my God, I've run into this crazy job that I have no idea how to do.
right.
They'll hop on FaceTime and walk the job site with you, right? Then the other kind of business coach is really for that $2 million plus operator,
Mhm.
because the kind of coaching and support that they need is different than the actual technical, like doing the work part, right?
Sure.
And so as franchises kind of age and enter that system through revenue, they get access to more like strategic business coaching, which is a different kind of vibe than just doing the work itself.
Right. Well, your perspective is so unique. One, that you're an owner operator of a franchise location, and then also on the corporate side of development of the 911 restoration on a national scale. So, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your advice and helping us learn more about 911 restoration. And I'm just curious, as closing advice for someone that's considering restoration franchising, but feeling unsure, and what would you want them to know?
So, and this is a little crass, so forgive me in advance. The very first question when I interview anybody, be it an employee for my company or a franchise candidate that talks to me, I ask them, "How do you feel about poop and blood?" Because the reality is, we deal with it. We don't deal with it often, but it is something that we deal with. And people need to understand it's a dirty job, but they'll wind up being like me because, like, I never thought I would say that sewage is my favorite kind of job to do until I cashed a check for a sewage job. And then I was like, oh, I get it now.
Right, right.
Yeah, if nobody wants to do it, that's the job that pays the best, right?
Wow. Well, that does make sense. Some
I
it's a
told you it
job
was
that
a little
nobody else has
crass. I
touched. So
apologize.
no, that's okay. I mean, it's real, it's authentic, and that's really what our listeners want to learn and hear about. So thank you so much for just being real about it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as far as success, what does that look like, both for franchisees and the brand?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know we kind of talked about this a little earlier of our goals, and we want to get all of our franchises over 2 million a year in revenue. The goal is how do we do that in 5 years, right? So, 500,000 is kind of the target for your first year when you're just getting your
Okay.
feet wet, learning the business. We try to make that stretch to about 100,000 by year two, or not 100,000, sorry, 1 million by year two. And typically that involves a transition from starting this thing out of your house to like, okay, I've got a warehouse. Having that space allows me to add new service offerings, pick up new pieces of equipment. Maybe I do contents and storage there, and then make that growth from years, through years 3 to 5 to 2 million plus. And that's through, maybe it's growth through acquisition, like buying out some of your competitors.
Sure.
Maybe it's, investing in, great referral sources,
Mhm.
partnering up part ownership in a plumbing business or something like that,
Mhm.
all things that just further complement the existing offering. Um,
Right.
And of course, really the goal is if I have a franchise owner that's doing 2 million a year, that means they're bringing home at least $400,000 themselves, and that is really where we're creating millionaire owners, right? Millionaire franchise owners who are personally millionaires. That's what we
Yeah.
go for.
That makes sense. Well, I never thought I would have fun discussing sewage, but here we are.
Yeah, it turns out my employees even didn't think they would enjoy it until they saw their paycheck after they did it. And then I was like, oh yeah, we want to do more of those, because I pay time and a half on sewage jobs and I pay double time on crime scene. So
Wow. Well, that's some great insight. And thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure meeting with you. It was a pleasure listening to your story and how you define success and growth, and also the development of 911 restoration. There's one last question. I may have missed this. Did you tell me how long you've been in business yourself personally with the franchise?
yeah, so my franchise has been open for a year and a half.
Okay. And you've been in the industry for how long?
So I've worked for the corporate office for about 11 years, give or take.
Wow. Yeah. Well, like I said, very unique perspective coming from someone on the outside and the inside. So thank you again, Dan, for sharing. And I appreciate you being on the Franchise Legends podcast.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Talk soon.